The silence in our house in Oak Creek, Illinois, wasn't the peaceful kind that comes with a life well lived. It was a heavy, suffocating atmosphere, the kind of silence that feels like it's vibrating with the force of things left unsaid. I sat at the mahogany kitchen table, my fingers tracing the grain of the wood. We had picked this table out during a rainy weekend in Chicago nearly 10 years ago. Back then, we were full of plans, dreaming of the dinner parties we would host and the family we would raise. Now the table felt like a cold, empty expanse between two people who had become strangers. I stared at my coffee mug. The liquid inside was stone cold, a dark, oily reflection of the man I barely recognized. My name is David. I am an architect, a man who deals in structural integrity and load-bearing capacities. I spend my days ensuring that buildings can withstand the pressures of wind, weight, and time. I thought I had built a fortress with my wife, Elena. I thought our foundation was poured deep and reinforced with steel. But as the clock on the wall ticked past 1:15 a.m., the mechanical click, click, click sounding like a countdown to an explosion, I realized I had been living in a house of cards. When the headlights finally swept across the living room walls, cutting through the humid Midwestern night like a searchlight looking for a fugitive, I didn't feel relief. I felt a cold, jagged stone settle in the pit of my stomach. The engine cut out. For a long, agonizing minute, there was only the sound of the crickets, then the heavy thud of a car door and the sharp, rhythmic clack of Elena's heels on the pavement. When she walked through the door, she didn't look tired. She looked electric. She smelled of expensive gin, wood smoke, and a heavy, musky perfume that I had never bought for her, a scent that didn't belong in our home. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. "Where were you, Elena? I called 3 times." She didn't even look at me. She just adjusted her silk scarf and headed for the stairs. "I was out with clients, David." "Don't start." I followed her to the hallway. "Clients? At 1 in the morning on a Tuesday?" She stopped, her hand on the banister, and turned with a look of pure ice. "It's not your business where I go." Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome to Family Secrets and Revenge, where the truth always costs more than you think. To understand how we got here, you have to look at the blueprints. We met in Chicago during a summer heat wave. I was a junior associate at a top-tier firm, and Elena was the most brilliant real estate closer I had ever seen. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and change the barometric pressure. I worshipped her. I remember our first date at a little bistro on the Riverwalk. She looked at me with those wide, searching eyes and said, "David, I want to build something that lasts forever." I thought she meant us. For the first few years, we were the it couple of the Chicago design scene. We were a team, and we moved to the suburbs to start our lives, buying this sprawling house in Oak Creek with its wraparound porch and the custom-designed kitchen. But somewhere between the mortgage payments and the promotion cycles, the we became me and her. The soft smiles were replaced by sharp, jagged edges of resentment. It happened slowly, like erosion. First, it was the late nights at the office. Then, the essential weekend seminars in St. Louis or Indianapolis. Eventually, every touch from her felt like a chore she was crossing off a list. I was an architect who couldn't see that my own home was structurally unsound. It always starts with the phone, doesn't it? For a decade, our devices lay open on the nightstands, shared and transparent. Then suddenly, Elena's phone became an extension of her hand. She took it to the bathroom. She took it to the laundry room. She even kept it tucked under her pillow at night. When I asked why she'd suddenly changed her passcode, she laughed, a short, brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "There was a data breach at the office, David. Don't be so paranoid. It's just corporate policy for our security clearance." But I wasn't being paranoid, I was being observant. I noticed the way her face would light up in the blue glow of the screen at midnight while I was lying right next to her. Her thumbs would dance across the glass with a frantic, rhythmic speed. She was communicating with someone in a language I wasn't invited to speak. One afternoon, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. A notification popped up from a contact saved only as T. It read, The suite is booked at the peninsula. I bring the emerald dress. My blood turned to ice. When she came out and saw me standing near the counter, she didn't ask what was wrong. She lunged for the phone with a predatory defensiveness. What are you doing? Prying into my work messages now? Is this how low you've sunk? The weeks following that text were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Whenever I tried to bring up the distance, the secrets, or the work meetings that lasted until dawn, Elena turned into a master litigator. She had this terrifying ability to flip the script so fast it made my head spin. David, you're clearly struggling with your own professional insecurities, she'd say, her voice calm and clinical, as if she were talking to a patient. Now, just because your career has plateaued and the Sterling Heights project is stressing you out, doesn't mean you have to invent fantasies about my life. That text was from a developer about a staging. The emerald dress was a joke about a color palette for a lobby. Honestly, your jealousy is becoming pathetic. Maybe you should see someone about your anxiety. She made me feel like I was losing my mind. She would look me dead in the eye and deny things I had seen with my own eyes. I'd find a receipt for a high-end jewelry store in her purse, and she'd tell me I was hallucinating, or that it was a gift for a top-performing employee that she was expensing. It's a special, psychological kind of torture when the person who is supposed to be your sanctuary deliberately tries to shatter your sense of reality. I started keeping a secret journal in my desk at the firm, writing down every lie, every date, and every discrepancy, not because I wanted to be a detective, but because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. By the peak of a sweltering Illinois August, the air in our house was so thick with lies I could barely breathe. I decided I couldn't live in the maybe anymore. I needed the definitely. I told Elena I had a late-night site visit at the Sterling Heights development, a massive commercial project that was the crown jewel of my career. Instead, I drove my car to a grocery store parking lot 3 blocks away, sat in the dark for an hour until my legs cramped, and then walked back toward our street. I felt like a criminal, a trespasser in my own life. I crouched behind a sprawling oak tree at the edge of our property, heard the mosquitoes biting at my neck, and waited. At 7:35 p.m., a sleek, charcoal black SUV, the kind that practically screamed old money, pulled into our driveway. The front door opened almost immediately. Elena stepped out, wearing the silk emerald green dress, the one she told me she had donated to charity months ago because it no longer fit her style. She looked radiant, and the sight of her beauty made me feel like I was being gutted with a rusty knife. She climbed into the passenger seat, and as the interior light flickered on, I saw her lean over to kiss the driver. It wasn't a quick peck. It was the kiss of a woman who had completely checked out of her marriage and into someone else's life. I stayed in the shadows, my hands shaking so hard I had to shove them into my pockets. I realized then that the woman I loved was a fiction, yet the reality was a stranger in a green dress. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. My training as an architect had taught me that you don't demolish a building while you're still standing inside it. You wait until you have the new plans and the demolition crew ready. I needed evidence that was bulletproof, the kind of proof that no amount of gaslighting could erase. I reached out to Marcus, an old contact from my university days who now ran a discreet digital forensics firm. We met in a dimly lit diner off I-294, the air smelling of stale cigarettes and burnt grease. I pushed Elena's old laptop and a spare tablet across the cracked vinyl table. I need everything, I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a dead man. Emails, deleted messages, bank transfers, location history, everything. Marcus looked at the devices, then up at me with a grim, weary empathy. You sure about this, Dave? Once I open this door, you can't close it. Most guys think they want the truth until they actually see the high-definition footage of it. I looked him in the eye, my resolve hardening into something cold and sharp. The truth is already there, Marcus. I'm just tired of being the only one not invited to see it. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Have you ever felt that gut instinct that something was wrong, even when everyone told you that you were crazy? Do you think David is doing the right thing by staying quiet and gathering evidence? A week later, Marcus called. His voice was flat, professional, but I could hear the hesitation. We met in a quiet park in Naperville, to hear the sound of children playing on a nearby jungle gym, providing a haunting contrast to what we were about to discuss. He handed me a thick manila envelope and an encrypted thumb drive. It's worse than a fling, David. A lot worse. She isn't just seeing someone else. She's actively destroying you. I opened the envelope. There were photos, yes. Elena and a man at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. The man was Julian Thorne. My stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. Thorne was a lead partner at a rival firm, a man who had been trying to sabotage my Sterling Heights bid for the last 6 months. But the photos weren't the worst part. Marcus pointed to the printouts of emails. Elena had been using her access to my home office to steal my proprietary design files, my client lists, and our firm's confidential bidding strategies. And she was literally selling my life's work to the man she was sleeping with. She wasn't just breaking my heart, she was dismantling my entire existence, brick by brick. Here on Family Secrets and Revenge, we see this often. Betrayal isn't just about the heart. It's about power, greed, and the cold-blooded destruction of a partner. I decided to host a professional peace offering. I invited Julian Thorne and his wife, Sarah, over for dinner. I told Elena it was a move to de-escalate the tension between our firms and perhaps find a way to collaborate on future projects. Elena was hesitant at first, her eyes narrowing as she searched my face for a trap. But her own arrogance was her undoing. She truly believed I was too predictable and soft to ever suspect her of something so complex. In the evening was a masterclass in psychological tension. I sat at the head of the table carving a roast, serving a vintage Cabernet that cost more than my first car. I watched them. I watched the way Julian's foot would accidentally brush hers under the table. I watched the way they shared looks of mutual triumph while Sarah sat there, talking about her charity work, completely unaware that her husband was a corporate thief and an adulterer. I felt like a ghost at my own table, a silent observer watching a play where every line was a lie. I felt a strange, cold power in knowing everything, while they thought I knew nothing. I smiled, I laughed at their jokes, and all the while, I was imagining the look on their faces when the walls finally came down. The moment the Thorne's SUV pulled out of the driveway, the perfect hostess mask Elena had been wearing didn't just slip, it shattered. She turned on me instantly, her voice high and sharp, the wine having loosened her restraint. That was embarrassing, David. You spent the whole night talking about integrity and old school values. No wonder Julian is beating you on every major contract. You're a relic. You have no idea how the real world works. I didn't answer right away. I walked over to the sideboard, poured myself the last of the wine, and let her rant. She went on for 10 minutes about how I lacked vision and how I was holding her back from the lifestyle she deserved. When she finally paused to take a breath, her chest heaving with indignation, I reached into the drawer and pulled out the manila envelope. I didn't toss it. I placed it gently on the table, it right next to her half-empty wine glass. The sound of the paper hitting the wood seemed to echo through the entire house. Elena opened the envelope with a look of bored annoyance. That annoyance vanished in a heartbeat. I watched the blood drain from her face as she saw the photos. I watched her hand tremble as she read the logs of the file transfers she had sent from my personal computer to Julian's private server. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the clock I had hated for so long. I was bored, David, she finally said, her voice dropping all pretense of emotion. It was cold, clinical, the voice of a stranger. You were always so safe, so steady. Julian is a shark. He's going somewhere. I wanted to be on the winning team for once. You wouldn't understand ambition if it bit you. I looked at her, and for the first time in 12 years, I didn't see my wife. I saw a competitor who had successfully infiltrated my life. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. If you found out your partner was not only cheating, but actively trying to destroy your career, would you seek revenge or just walk away? Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. It's not your business where I go, she had screamed at me that night in the kitchen. I leaned across the table, my voice a low, steady hum that made her flinch. I made it my business, Elena. And I made it everyone else's business too. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine terror finally appearing in them. I explained that while she was busy winning, I had been busy securing the perimeter. I hadn't just given the file to her. I had already sent digital copies to Julian's wife, Sarah, who, as it turned out, held the majority of the shares in Julian's firm through a family trust. I had also sent the evidence of corporate espionage to the board of directors at Thorne's firm and to the state licensing board. I wasn't just filing for divorce. I was ensuring that neither she nor Julian would ever work in this industry again. I was the architect, and I had just pulled the keystone out of their lives. I watched as she realized that the predictable man had just ended her world. The destruction was swifter than even I had imagined. Julian Thorne wasn't the shark Elena thought he was. He was a parasite who relied on stolen ideas. When the board saw the evidence, they didn't just fire him. As they sued him for breach of fiduciary duty and intellectual property theft to protect their own reputations. Sarah Thorne, a woman with a backbone of cold-rolled steel, filed for divorce the next morning and used her family's massive legal team to freeze every joint asset Julian had. Elena, who thought she was moving into a life of luxury with a winner, suddenly found herself tied to a man who was unemployed, legally toxic, and completely broke. They were forced to move into a tiny two-bedroom rental in a gritty part of the city Elena used to call the Sticks. On Family Secrets and Revenge, we know that the hardest part of the story isn't the betrayal. It's the moment the betrayer realizes they burned the only bridge that was actually holding them up. The divorce proceedings in the Cook County courthouse were a bloodbath. When Elena tried every trick in the book, she claimed emotional distress. She tried to argue that the digital evidence was obtained illegally, and she even attempted to claim a stake in my architectural firm as marital property. But the evidence of her active sabotage was her undoing. During the deposition, my lawyer, a shark named Harrison, leaned in and asked her, "Did you or did you not knowingly transfer proprietary blueprints belonging to your husband's firm to a direct competitor?" Elena looked at me, her eyes full of venom, and said, "I did what I had to do to survive a boring marriage." The judge didn't see it that way. In the eyes of the law, she was a bad faith actor. By the time the final decree was hammered down, Elena walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and a massive legal bill. I kept the house, the firm, it ran my dignity. After the final papers were signed, I returned to the Oak Creek house alone. It felt different. The air was lighter, the shadows less threatening. I spent the next month systematically removing every trace of her existence. I repainted the walls from her favorite beige to a crisp, clean white. I replaced the carpets, sold every piece of furniture we had bought together, and even changed the landscaping. I realized that my worth had been tied to a woman who couldn't see it because she was too busy looking for a shortcut to the top. I started taking long weekend trips to the North Woods, sitting by the lake, rediscovering the man I was before I met her. I realized that being predictable wasn't a flaw. It meant I was a man of my word. It meant I was stable. And in a world full of people like Elena and Julian, with stability as the rarest and most valuable currency of all. I saw her one last time nearly 2 years after the Dinner of Shadows. I was in a hardware store 3 towns over, picking up some supplies for a new project. I turned a corner into the paint aisle, and there she was. She looked diminished. The expensive highlights were gone, her hair a flat, natural brown. She was wearing an old coat I remembered from our early years in the city, and she was squinting at the price of a gallon of discount paint. Our eyes met. For a split second, I saw a flash of the old Elena, the one who thought she could charm her way out of any consequence. She opened her mouth as if to say something, an apology, a plea, maybe just another lie to try and hook me back in. I didn't give her the chance. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel the need for a final word. I just gave her a small, polite nod, the kind you give a distant acquaintance you barely remember, and walked away. My business was no longer hers, and her life was a project I was no longer interested in fixing. I threw myself into my work with a new intensity. The Sterling Heights project became a landmark in the region, winning several architectural awards for its uncompromising structural integrity. I started a scholarship for young architects who showed a commitment to ethical practice. I learned that loyalty is a luxury not everyone can afford, and that some people are only as faithful as their current options. I learned that when someone screams, "It's not your business," it's because they've already made your business their weapon. I learned to trust my gut, that quiet and a persistent voice that tells you when the load-bearing walls are starting to groan under the weight of deceit. It's the only compass that never lies, and I would never ignore it again. Today, the Oak Creek house is a home again. I've filled it with new memories, new friends, and a sense of peace I didn't think was possible during those dark nights a year ago. I'm careful now about who I let into my inner circle, but I'm not bitter. I'm just awake. I've realized that the end of my marriage wasn't a tragedy. It was a necessary demolition. I was being held back by someone who didn't want me to succeed, and losing her was the best thing that ever happened to my career and my soul. I am building something new now, and this time, the foundation is made of truth. David's journey from betrayal to justice was long and painful. If you were in David's shoes, facing a betrayal that threatened your very livelihood, would you have the patience to play the long game like he did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Betrayal is a poison that works slowly, eroding the heart until there's nothing left but dust. But the truth is a sudden, sharp antidote that clears the senses. Elena thought she could live a double life, reaping the benefits of my hard work while secretly trying to dismantle it. She forgot that secrets have a way of seeking the light, especially when the person they're being kept from is the one who built the room they're hiding in. Thank you for joining us for this journey on family secrets and revenge. Your support allows us to keep bringing these stories of truth and justice to light. If David's story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share your overall thoughts on the outcome in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the shadows of the human heart. Until next time, remember, the truth doesn't care about your feelings, but it will always set you free. Take care out there.